large city, packed with so many houses and people that there isn't room for everyone to have even a small garden, most people are forced to settle for a few flowers in pots. However, in one of these large cities lived two poor children who had a garden that was a little bigger and better than just a few flower pots. They weren't brother and sister, but they loved each other almost as much as if they were. Their parents lived across from each other in two top-floor apartments, where the roofs of the neighboring houses nearly touched and the rain gutter ran between them. Each house had a small window, so you could step across the gutter from one window to the other. The parents of these children each had a large wooden box in which they grew vegetables for their own use, as well as a little rose bush in each box that grew splendidly. After a while, the parents decided to place these two boxes across the gutter so that they reached from one window to the other, looking like two banks of flowers. Sweet peas trailed over the boxes, and the rose bushes shot out long branches that were trained around the windows and clustered together, looking almost like a triumphal arch of leaves and flowers. Since the boxes were very high up, the children knew they weren't allowed to climb on them without permission, but they were often allowed to step out together and sit on their little stools under the rose bushes or play quietly. In the winter, this pleasure came to an end because the windows were often completely frozen over, but then they would heat copper pennies on the stove and hold the warm coins against the frozen glass. Very quickly, this would make a little round peephole. Through these holes, the soft, bright eyes of the little boy and girl would beam as they looked at each other. Their names were Kay and Gerda. In the summer, they could be together with one jump from the window, but in the winter, they had to go down the long staircase and out through the snow before they could meet. "Look, the white bees are swarming," Kay's old grandmother said one day when it was snowing. "Do they have a queen bee?" the little boy asked, for he knew that real bees had a queen. "They certainly do," said the grandmother. "She flies there where the swarm is thickest. She is the largest of them all, and she never stays on the ground but flies up to the dark clouds. Often, at midnight, she flies through the streets of the town and looks in at the windows. Then the ice freezes on the glass into wonderful shapes that look like flowers and castles." "Yes, I have seen them," said both children, and they knew it must be true. "Can the Snow Queen come in here?" the little girl asked. "Just let her try," the boy said. "I'll put her on the stove and then she'll melt." Then the grandmother smoothed his hair and told him some more stories. One evening, when little Kay was at home and getting ready for bed, he climbed on a chair by the window and peeked out through the little hole. A few snowflakes were falling, and one of them, rather larger than the rest, landed on the edge of one of the flower boxes. This snowflake grew larger and larger until it finally took the shape of a woman dressed in clothes made of white gauze, which looked like millions of starry snowflakes linked together. She was fair and beautiful, but she was made of ice, shining and glittering ice. Still, she was alive, and her eyes sparkled like bright stars, though there was neither peace nor rest in her gaze. She nodded toward the window and waved her hand. The little boy was frightened and jumped down from the chair. At that same moment, it seemed as if a large bird flew past the window. The next day, there was a clear frost, and very soon spring arrived. The sun shone, the young green leaves burst out, the swallows built their nests, the windows were opened, and the children sat once more in their garden on the roof, high above all the other rooms. How beautifully the roses bloomed that summer. The little girl had learned a hymn that mentioned roses, and it made her think of their own roses. She sang the hymn to the little boy, and he sang along too. "Roses bloom and fade away, but we shall see the Christ child one day." Then the little ones held each other by the hand, kissed the roses, and looked at the bright sunshine, speaking to it as if the Christ child were actually there. Those were splendid summer days. How beautiful and fresh it was out among the rose bushes, which looked as if they would never stop blooming. One day, Kay and Gerda sat looking at a book full of pictures of animals and birds. Just as the clock in the church tower struck 12, Kay said, "Oh, something struck my heart," and soon after, "There is something in my eye." The little girl put her arm around his neck and looked into his eye, but she couldn't see anything. "I think it is gone," he said. But it was not gone. It was one of those bits of the magic mirror, that ugly glass we spoke of before, which made everything great and good look small and ugly, while everything wicked and bad became more visible, and every little fault stood out plainly. Poor little Kay had also received a small splinter in his heart, which very quickly turned into a lump of ice. He felt no more pain, but the glass was still there. "Why are you crying?" he said at last. "It makes you look ugly. There is nothing wrong with me now." "Oh, look!" he cried suddenly. "That rose is worm-eaten and this one is completely crooked. After all, they are ugly roses, just like the box they're standing in." And then he kicked the boxes with his foot and ripped off the 2 roses. "Kay, what are you doing?" the little girl cried. When he saw how frightened she was, he tore off another rose and jumped through his own window away from little Gerda. Later, when she brought out the picture book, he said, "That is only fit for babies." And when his grandmother told stories, he would interrupt her with "but." Or, when he could manage it, he would get behind her chair, put on a pair of glasses, and imitate her very cleverly to make people laugh. Before long, he began to mimic the speech and walk of people in the street. He would instantly imitate anything peculiar or unpleasant about a person, and people said, "That boy is very clever. He has a remarkable genius." But it was the piece of glass in his eye and the coldness in his heart that made him act like this. He would even tease little Gerda, who loved him with all her heart. His games, too, became quite different. They were not so childish anymore. One winter day, when it snowed, he brought out a magnifying glass. He held out the tail of his blue coat and let the snowflakes fall on it. "Look in this glass, Gerda," he said. She saw how every flake of snow was magnified and looked like a beautiful flower or a glittering star. "Isn't it clever?" said Kay. "It's much more interesting than looking at real flowers. There isn't a single flaw in them, and the snowflakes are totally perfect until they begin to melt." Soon after, Kay appeared wearing large, thick gloves and carrying his sled on his back. He yelled upstairs to Gerda, "I have to leave to go to the big square where the other boys play and ride." And away he went. In the big square, the boldest boys would often tie their sleds to the farmers' carts and ride with them for a good distance. This was great fun. But while they were all amusing themselves and Kay was with them, a huge sleigh came by. It was painted white, and in it sat someone wrapped in rough white fur and wearing a white cap. The sleigh drove around the square twice, and Kay fastened his own little sled to it so that when it drove away, he followed it. It went faster and faster right through the next street, and then the person driving turned around and nodded pleasantly to Kay, just as if they knew each other. But whenever Kay wanted to untie his little sled, the driver nodded again, so Kay sat still and they drove out through the town gate. Then the snow began to fall so heavily that the little boy couldn't see a hand's breadth in front of him, but they still drove on. Suddenly, he let go of the rope so the large sleigh would go on without him, but it was no use. His little carriage held fast and away they went like the wind. He yelled out loudly, but nobody heard him, while the snow beat down on him and the sleigh flew onward. Every now and then, it gave a jump as if it were going over hedges and ditches. The boy was frightened and tried to say a prayer, but he could remember nothing but his multiplication tables. The snowflakes became larger and larger until they looked like great white chickens. All at once they sprang aside, the great sleigh stopped, and the person who had driven it stood up. The fur and the cap, which were made entirely of snow, fell off, and he saw a lady, tall and white. It was the Snow Queen. "We have made good time," she said. "But why are you trembling? Here, crawl into my warm fur." Then she seated him beside her in the sleigh, and as she wrapped the fur around him, he felt as if he were sinking into a snowdrift. "Are you still cold?" she asked as she kissed him on the forehead. The kiss was colder than ice. It went right through to his heart, which was already almost a lump of ice. He felt as if he were going to die, but only for a moment. Soon he seemed quite well again, and didn't notice the cold around him. "My sled! Don't forget my sled!" was his first thought. He looked back and saw that it was tied fast to one of the white chickens, which flew behind him with the sled on its back. The Snow Queen kissed little Kay again, and by this time he had forgotten little Gerda, his grandmother, and everyone at home. "Now you must have no more kisses," she said, "or I will kiss you to death." Kay looked at her and saw that she was so beautiful. He could not imagine a more lovely and intelligent face. She did not seem to be made of ice now, as she had when he saw her through his window, and she nodded to him. In his eyes, she was perfect, and he didn't feel afraid at all. He told her he could do mental math, even fractions, and that he knew the square mileage and population of the country. She always smiled, which made him think he didn't know enough yet. She looked around the vast expanse as she flew higher and higher with him upon a black cloud, while the storm blew and howled as if it were singing old songs. They flew over woods and lakes, over sea and land. Below them, the wild wind roared, the wolves howled, and the snow crackled. Above them flew black screaming crows. and above it all shone the moon, clear and bright. In this way, Kay passed the long winter's night, and by day he slept at the feet of the Snow Queen. But how was little Gerda doing while Kay was gone? No one knew what had become of him, nor could anyone give the slightest information except for the boys who said he had tied his sled to another very large one, which had driven through the street and out the town gate. Nobody knew where it went. Many tears were shed for him, and little Gerda wept bitterly for a long time. She said she knew he must be dead, that he had drowned in the river that flowed close by the school. Oh, those long winter days were indeed very dreary. But at last spring came with warm sunshine. "Kay is dead and gone," said little Gerda. "I don't believe it," said the sunshine. "He is dead and gone," she said to the sparrows. "We don't believe it," they replied. Finally, little Gerda began to doubt it herself. "I will put on my new red shoes," she said one morning, "the ones Kay has never seen, and then I will go down to the river and ask about him." It was quite early when she kissed her old grandmother, who was still asleep. Then she put on her red shoes and went all alone out of the town gates toward the river. "Is it true that you have taken my little playmate away from me?" she said to the river. "I will give you my red shoes if you will give him back to me." And it seemed as if the waves nodded to her in a strange way. Then she took off her red shoes, which she liked better than anything else, and threw them both into the river. But they fell near the bank, and the little waves carried them back to the land, just as if the river would not take what she loved best because it could not give her back little Kay. But she thought she hadn't thrown the shoes far enough out. So she crept into a boat that lay among the reeds and threw the shoes again from the far end of the boat into the water. But the boat wasn't tied up, and her movement sent it gliding away from the land. When she saw this, she hurried to get back to the other end of the boat, but before she could do so, it was more than a yard from the bank and drifting away faster than ever. Little Gerda was very frightened and began to cry, but no one heard her except the sparrows. They couldn't carry her to land, but they flew along the shore and sang as if to comfort her, "Here we are, here we are." The boat floated with the current. Little Gerda sat quite still with only her stockings on her feet. The red shoes floated after her, but she couldn't reach them because the boat kept moving too far ahead. The banks on each side of the river were very pretty. There were beautiful flowers, old trees, and sloping fields where cows and sheep were grazing, but not a single person was to be seen. "Perhaps the river will carry me to little Kay," thought Gerda. She became more cheerful, raised her head, and looked at the beautiful green banks, and so the boat sailed on for hours. At last she came to a large cherry orchard in which stood a small red house with strange red and blue windows. It also had a thatched roof, and outside stood 2 wooden soldiers who presented arms to her as she sailed past. Gerda called out to them because she thought they were alive, but of course they didn't answer. As the boat drifted nearer to the shore, she saw what they really were. Then Gerda called even louder, and a very old woman came out of the house leaning on a crutch. She wore a large hat to shade her from the sun, and painted on it were all sorts of pretty flowers. "You poor little child," said the old woman. "How did you manage to come all this distance into the wide world on such a fast-moving stream?" Then the old woman walked into the water, grabbed the boat with her crutch, pulled it to land, and lifted Gerda out. Gerda was glad to feel dry ground again, although she was a little afraid of the strange old woman. "Come and tell me who you are," she said, "and how you came here." Then Gerda told her everything while the old woman shook her head and said, "Hem." When she had finished, Gerda asked if she had seen little Kay. The old woman told her he hadn't passed by that way, but he very likely would come. So she told Gerda not to be sad, but to taste the cherries and look at the flowers. They were better than in any picture book, for each of them could tell a story. Then she took Gerda by the hand and led her into the little house, and the old woman closed the door. The windows were very high up, and since the panes were red, blue, and yellow, the daylight shone through them in all sorts of strange colors. On the table stood beautiful cherries, and Gerda had permission to eat as many as she wanted. While she was eating them, the old woman combed out Gerda's long golden curls with a golden comb, and the glossy ringlets hung down on each side of her little round, pleasant face, which looked as fresh and blooming as a rose. "I have long wished for a dear little girl like you," said the old woman, "and now you must stay with me and see how happily we shall live together." While she went on combing little Gerda's hair, Gerda thought less and less about her adopted brother Kay, for the old woman could do magic, although she wasn't a wicked witch. She only did a little magic for her own amusement, and now she did it because she wanted to keep Gerda. Therefore she went into the garden and stretched out her crutch toward all the rose bushes. Beautiful as they were, they immediately sank into the dark earth so that no one could tell where they had once stood. The old woman was afraid that if little Gerda saw roses, she would think of the ones at home, remember little Kay, and run away. Then she took Gerda into the flower garden. How fragrant and beautiful it was. Every flower you could think of for every season of the year was here in full bloom. No picture book could have more beautiful colors. Gerda jumped for joy and played until the sun went down behind the tall cherry trees. Then she slept in an elegant bed with red silk pillows embroidered with colored violets, and she dreamed as pleasantly as a queen on her wedding day. The next day, and for many days after, Gerda played with the flowers in the warm sunshine. She knew every flower, and yet, although there were so many of them, it seemed as if one were missing, but she couldn't tell which one it was. One day, however, as she sat looking at the old woman's hat with the painted flowers on it, she saw that the prettiest one of all was a rose. The old woman had forgotten to take it off her hat when she made all the live roses sink into the earth. But it is difficult to keep track of everything. One little mistake upsets all our plans. "What? Are there no roses here?" cried Gerda. She ran out into the garden, examined all the beds, and searched and searched. There wasn't one to be found. Then she sat down and wept, and her tears fell right on the spot where one of the rose bushes had sunk down. The warm tears moistened the earth, and the rose bush sprouted up at once, blooming just as beautifully as when it had sunk. Gerda hugged it and kissed the roses, thinking of the beautiful roses at home, and with them of little Kay. "Oh, how I have been delayed," said the little girl. "I wanted to look for little Kay. Do you know where he is?" she asked the roses. "Do you think he is dead?" And the roses answered, "No, he is not dead. We have been in the ground where all the dead lie, but Kay is not there." "Thank you," said little Gerda, and then she went to the other flowers, looked into their little cups, and asked, "Do you know where little Kay is?" But each flower, standing in the sunshine, dreamed only of its own little fairy tale. Not one knew anything of Kay. Gerda heard many stories from the flowers as she asked them one after another about him. And what said the tiger lily? "Hark, do you hear the drum? Boom, boom. There are only two notes, always boom, boom. Listen to the women's song of mourning. Hear the cry of the priest. In her long red robe stands the Hindu widow by the funeral pyre. The flames rise around her as she places herself on the dead body of her husband. But the Hindu woman is thinking of the living one in that circle, of him, her son, who lit those flames. Those shining eyes trouble her heart more painfully than the flames which will soon consume her body to ashes. Can the fire of the heart be extinguished in the flames of the funeral pyre?" "I don't understand that at all," said little Gerda. "That is my story," said the tiger lily. "What says the morning glory?" "Near that narrow road stands an old knight's castle. Thick ivy creeps over the old ruined walls, leaf over leaf, all the way to the balcony where a beautiful maiden stands. She leans over the railing and looks up the road. No rose on its stem is fresher than she. No apple blossom wafted by the wind floats more lightly than she moves. Her rich silk rustles as she leans over and exclaims, 'Will he not come?'" "Is it Kay you mean?" asked Gerda. "I am only speaking of a story from my dream," replied the flower. "What said the little snowdrop?" "Between two trees a rope is hanging. There is a piece of board upon it. It is a swing. Two pretty little girls in dresses white as snow and with long green ribbons fluttering from their hats are sitting on it swinging. Their brother, who is taller than they are, stands in the swing. He has one arm around the rope to steady himself. In one hand he holds a little bowl and in the other a clay pipe. He is blowing bubbles. As the swing moves, the bubbles fly upward, reflecting the most beautiful changing colors. The last one still hangs from the bowl of the pipe and sways in the wind. On goes the swing, and then a little black dog comes running up. He is almost as light as the bubble, and he raises himself on his hind legs and wants to be taken into the swing. But it doesn't stop, and the dog falls. Then he barks and gets angry. The children lean toward him, and the bubble bursts. A swinging plank, a light, sparkling foam picture. That is my story." "It may be very pretty, what you are telling me," said little Gerda, "but you speak so mournfully, and you do not mention little Kay at all." "What do the hyacinths say?" There were 3 beautiful sisters, fair and delicate. The dress of one was red, the second blue, and the third pure white. Hand in hand, they danced in the bright moonlight by the calm lake. They were human beings, not fairies. The sweet fragrance attracted them, and they disappeared into the wood. Here the fragrance became stronger. 3 coffins in which lay the 3 beautiful maidens glided from the thickest part of the forest across the lake. Fireflies flew lightly over them like little floating torches. Do the dancing maidens sleep, or are they dead? The scent of the flower says that they are corpses. The evening bell tolls their funeral knell. You make me quite sad, said little Gerda. Your perfume is so strong, you make me think of the dead maidens. Ah, is little Kay really dead then? The roses have been in the earth, and they say no. Ding dong, tolled the hyacinth bells. We are not tolling for little Kay. We do not know him. We sing our song, the only one we know. Then Gerda went to the buttercups that were glittering among the bright green leaves. You are little bright suns, said Gerda. Tell me if you know where I can find my playmate. And the buttercups sparkled cheerfully and looked back at Gerda. What song could the buttercups sing? It was not about Kay. The bright, warm sun shone on a little courtyard on the first warm day of spring. His bright beams rested on the white walls of the neighboring house, and close by bloomed the first yellow flower of the season, glittering like gold in the sun's warm ray. An old woman sat in her armchair at the house door, and her granddaughter, a poor and pretty servant maid, came to see her for a short visit. When she kissed her grandmother, there was gold everywhere, the gold of the heart in that holy kiss. It was a golden morning. There was gold in the beaming sunlight, gold in the leaves of the lowly flower, and gold on the lips of the maiden. There, that is my story, said the buttercup. My poor old grandmother, sighed Gerda. She is longing to see me and grieving for me just as she did for little Kay. But I shall soon go home now and take little Kay with me. It is no use asking the flowers. They know only their own songs and can give me no information. Then she tucked up her little dress so she could run faster, but the narcissus caught her by the leg as she was jumping over it. So she stopped, looked at the tall yellow flower, and said, Perhaps you know something. She stooped down quite close to the flower and listened. And what did he say? I can see myself, said the narcissus. Oh, how sweet is my perfume. Up in a little room with a bay window stands a little dancing girl, half dressed. She stands sometimes on one leg and sometimes on both, and looks as if she would tread the whole world under her feet. She is nothing but an illusion. She's pouring water out of a teapot onto a piece of cloth she holds in her hand. It is her bodice. Cleanliness is a good thing, she says. Her white dress hangs on a peg. It has also been washed in the teapot and dried on the roof. She puts it on and ties a saffron-colored handkerchief around her neck, which makes the dress look whiter. See how she stretches out her legs as if she were showing off on a stem. I can see myself. What do I care about all that? Said Gerda. You don't need to tell me such stuff. Then she ran to the other end of the garden. The door was fastened, but she pushed against the rusty latch and it gave way. The door sprang open and little Gerda ran out with bare feet into the wide world. She looked back 3 times, but no one seemed to be following her. At last she could run no longer, so she sat down to rest on a large stone. When she looked around, she saw that summer was over and autumn was very far advanced. She had known nothing of this in the beautiful garden where the sun shone and the flowers grew all year round. Oh, how I have wasted my time, said little Gerda. It is autumn. I must not rest any longer. She stood up to go on. But her little feet were sore and tired, and everything around her looked so cold and bleak. The long willow leaves were quite yellow. The dewdrops fell like water, leaf after leaf dropped from the trees, and the sloe bush alone still bore fruit, but the sloes were sour and set your teeth on edge. Oh, how dark and weary the whole world appeared. Gerda had to rest again, and just across from where she sat, she saw a large crow hopping across the snow toward her. He stood looking at her for some time, and then he wagged his head and said, Caw, caw, good day, good day. He pronounced the words as clearly as he could because he meant to be kind to the little girl. Then he asked her where she was going, all alone in the wide world. Gerda understood the word alone very well and knew how much it meant. So she told the crow the whole story of her life and adventures and asked him if he had seen little Kay. The crow nodded his head very seriously and said, Perhaps I have. It could be. No, do you think you have? Cried little Gerda, and she kissed the crow and hugged him almost to death with joy. Gently, gently, said the crow. I think I know. I believe it might be little Kay, but he has certainly forgotten you by now for the princess. Does he live with a princess? Asked Gerda. Yes, listen, replied the crow, but it is so difficult to speak your language. If you understand the crow's language, then I can explain it better. Do you?" "No, I have never learned it," said Gerda, "but my grandmother understands it and used to speak it to me. I wish I had learned it." "It doesn't matter," answered the crow. "I will explain as well as I can, although I'll do it badly." And he told her what he had heard. "In this kingdom where we are now," he said, "lives a princess who is so wonderfully clever that she has read all the newspapers in the world, and forgotten them too, even though she is so clever. A short time ago, as she was sitting on her throne, which people say isn't as comfortable as you might think, she began to sing a song that starts with these words: 'Why should I not get married?' 'Why not indeed?' she said. And so she decided to marry if she could find a husband who knew what to say when he was spoken to, and not one who could only look grand, for that was so boring. Then she gathered all her court ladies together to the beat of a drum, and when they heard her intentions, they were very pleased. 'We are so glad to hear it,' they said. 'We were talking about it ourselves just the other day.' 'You may believe that every word I tell you is true,' said the crow, 'for I have a tame sweetheart who goes freely about the palace, and she told me all this.' Of course, his sweetheart was a crow, for birds of a feather flock together, and one crow always chooses another crow. Newspapers were published immediately with a border of hearts and the princess's initials among them. They announced that every young man who was handsome was free to visit the castle and speak with the princess. Those who could reply loudly enough to be heard when spoken to were to make themselves quite at home at the palace. But the one who spoke best would be chosen as a husband for the princess. 'Yes, yes, you can believe me, it is all as true as I sit here,' said the crow. People came in crowds. There was a great deal of pushing and running about, but no one succeeded on the first or second day. They could all speak very well while they were outside in the streets, but when they entered the palace gates and saw the guards in silver uniforms and the footmen in their golden livery on the staircase, and the great halls lit up, they became quite confused. And when they stood before the throne where the princess sat, they could do nothing but repeat the last words she had said, and she had no particular wish to hear her own words again. It was just as if they had all taken something to make them sleepy while they were in the palace, for they didn't recover or speak until they got back out into the street. There was a long line of them reaching all the way from the town gate to the palace. 'I went myself to see them,' said the crow. 'They were hungry and thirsty, for at the palace they didn't get even a glass of water. Some of the wisest had brought a few slices of bread and butter with them, but they didn't share with their neighbors. They thought if they went in to the princess looking hungry, there would be a better chance for themselves.' 'But Kay, tell me about little Kay,' said Gerda. 'Was he in the crowd?' 'Wait a bit, we are just coming to him. On the third day, a little person came marching cheerfully along to the palace without horses or carriage. His eyes sparkled like yours, and he had beautiful long hair, but his clothes were very poor.' 'That was Kay,' said Gerda joyfully. 'Oh, then I have found him,' and she clapped her hands. 'He had a little knapsack on his back,' added the crow. 'No, it must have been his sled,' said Gerda, 'for he went away with it.' 'It may have been,' said the crow. 'I didn't look at it very closely, but I know from my tame sweetheart that he passed through the palace gates, saw the guards in their silver uniforms, and the servants in their gold liveries on the stairs. But he wasn't the least bit embarrassed. 'It must be very tiresome to stand on the stairs,' he said. 'I prefer to go in.' The rooms were blazing with light. Counselors and ambassadors walked about barefoot, carrying golden vessels. It was enough to make anyone feel serious. His boots creaked loudly as he walked, and yet he wasn't at all uneasy. 'It must be Kay,' said Gerda. 'I know he had new boots on. I heard them creak in grandmother's room.' 'They really did creak,' said the crow, yet he went boldly up to the princess herself, who was sitting on a pearl as large as a spinning wheel. All the ladies of the court were present with their maids, and all the noblemen with their servants, and each of the maids had another maid to wait on her, and the noblemen's servants had their own servants, as well as a page each. They all stood in circles around the princess, and the closer they stood to the door, the prouder they looked. The servants' pages, who always wore slippers, could hardly be looked at. They held themselves up so proudly by the door. 'It must be quite awful,' said little Gerda. 'But did Kay win the princess?' 'If I hadn't been a crow,' he said, 'I would have married her myself, even though I am engaged. He spoke just as well as I do when I speak the crow's language, so I heard from my tame sweetheart. He was quite free and agreeable, and said he hadn't come to woo the princess, but to hear her wisdom, and he was as pleased with her as she was with him. "Oh, certainly that was Kay," said Gerda. "He was so clever. He could do mental arithmetic and fractions. Oh, will you take me to the palace?" "It is very easy to ask that," replied the crow, "but how are we to manage it? However, I will speak to my tame sweetheart about it and ask her advice. For I must tell you it will be very difficult to get permission for a little girl like you to enter the palace." "Oh yes, but I shall get permission easily," said Gerda, "for when Kay hears that I am here, he will come out and fetch me immediately." "Wait for me here by the fence," said the crow, wagging his head as he flew away. It was late in the evening before the crow returned. "Caw, caw," he said. "She sends you greetings, and here is a little roll she took from the kitchen for you. There is plenty of bread there, and she thinks you must be hungry. It isn't possible for you to enter the palace by the front entrance. The guards in silver uniforms and the servants in gold livery would not allow it. But don't cry. We will manage to get you in. My sweetheart knows a little back staircase that leads to the bedrooms, and she knows where to find the key." Then they went into the garden through the great avenue, where the leaves were falling one after another. When they saw the lights in the palace being put out in the same way, the crow led little Gerda to the back door, which stood slightly open. Oh, how little Gerda's heart beat with anxiety and longing. It was just as if she were going to do something wrong, and yet she only wanted to know where little Kay was. "It must be him," she thought, "with those clear eyes and that long hair." She could imagine seeing him smile at her, as he used to at home when they sat among the roses. He would certainly be glad to see her, to hear what a long distance she had come for his sake, and to know how sorry they had been at home because he didn't come back. Oh, what joy and fear she felt. They were now on the stairs, and in a small closet at the top a lamp was burning. In the middle of the floor stood the tame crow, turning her head from side to side and gazing at Gerda, who curtsied as her grandmother had taught her to do. "My fiancé has spoken so highly of you, my little lady," said the tame crow. "Your life history, vita as it may be called, is very touching. If you will take the lamp, I will walk before you. We will go straight along this way, then we won't meet anyone." "It seems to me as if somebody were behind us," said Gerda, as something rushed by her like a shadow on the wall. Then horses with flying manes and thin legs, hunters and ladies and gentlemen on horseback glided by her like shadows on the wall. "They are only dreams," said the crow. "They are coming to fetch the thoughts of the great people out hunting. All the better, for we shall be able to look at them in their beds more safely. I hope that when you rise to honor and favor, you will show a grateful heart." "You may be quite sure of that," said the crow from the forest. They now came into the first hall, the walls of which were covered with rose-colored satin embroidered with artificial flowers. Here the dreams flitted by them again, but so quickly that Gerda couldn't distinguish the royal people. Each hall appeared more splendid than the last. It was enough to bewilder anyone. At last they reached a bedroom. The ceiling was like a great palm tree with glass leaves of the most costly crystal, and over the center of the floor, 2 beds, each resembling a lily, hung from a stem of gold. One, in which the princess lay, was white, the other was red, and in this one Gerda had to look for little Kay. She pushed one of the red petals aside and saw a little brown neck. Oh, that must be Kay. She called his name out quite loudly and held the lamp over him. The dreams rushed back into the room on horseback. He woke up and turned his head around. It was not little Kay. The prince only resembled him in the neck. Still, he was young and handsome. Then the princess peeked out of her white lily bed and asked what was the matter. Little Gerda wept and told her story and everything the crows had done to help her. "Ooh, you poor child," said the prince and princess. They praised the crows and said they weren't angry about what they had done, but that it must not happen again. However, this time they would be rewarded. "Would you like to have your freedom?" asked the princess, "or would you prefer to be appointed as court crows with all the leftovers from the kitchen for yourselves?" Both crows bowed and begged for the permanent appointment, for they thought of their old age and said it would be so comfortable to feel that they had provisions for their old days, as they called it. Then the prince got out of his bed and gave it to Gerda. He could do no more, and she lay down. She folded her little hands and thought, "How good everyone is to me, men and animals too." Then she closed her eyes and fell into a sweet sleep. All the dreams came flying back again to her, and they looked like angels, and one of them pulled a little sled on which sat Kay, nodding to her. But all this was only a dream, and it vanished as soon as she woke up. The following day, she was dressed from head to foot in silk and velvet. They invited her to stay at the palace for a few days and enjoy herself, but she only begged for a pair of boots, a little carriage, and a horse to draw it, so that she might go into the wide world to look for Kay. She received not only boots but also a muff, and she was neatly dressed. When she was ready to go, she found a coach made of pure gold waiting at the door, with the coat of arms of the prince and princess shining on it like a star. The coachman, footman, and outriders all wore golden crowns on their heads. The prince and princess themselves helped her into the coach and wished her success. The forest crow, who was now married, accompanied her for the first 3 miles. He sat by Gerda's side because he couldn't stand riding backward. The tame crow stood in the doorway flapping her wings. She couldn't go with them because she had been suffering from a headache ever since her new appointment, no doubt from eating too much. The coach was well stocked with sweet cakes, and under the seat were fruit and gingerbread cookies. "Farewell, farewell," cried the prince and princess. Little Gerda wept, and the crow wept. Then, after a few miles, the crow also said, "Farewell," and this was the saddest parting. However, he flew to a tree and stood flapping his black wings as long as he could see the coach, which glittered in the bright sunshine. The coach drove on through a thick forest, lighting up the path like a torch. It dazzled the eyes of some robbers who couldn't stand to let it pass without attacking it. "It's gold! It's gold!" they shouted, rushing forward and grabbing the horses. They killed the little postilions, the coachman, and the footman, and pulled little Gerda out of the carriage. "She is plump and pretty, and she's been fed on nut kernels," said the old robber woman, who had a long beard and eyebrows that hung down over her eyes. "She's as good as a little lamb. How nice she will taste." As she said this, she pulled out a shining knife that glittered horribly. "Ouch!" screamed the old woman at that same moment, for her own daughter, who was holding onto her back, had bitten her on the ear. She was a wild and naughty girl, and the mother called her an ugly thing and didn't have time to kill Gerda. "She will play with me," said the little robber girl. "She will give me her muff and her pretty dress and sleep with me in my bed." Then she bit her mother again, making her jump into the air and hop about. All the robbers laughed and said, "Look how she dances with her cub." "I want to ride in the coach," said the little robber girl, and she got her way, for she was very spoiled and stubborn. She and Gerda sat in the coach and drove away over stumps and stones deep into the forest. The little robber girl was about the same size as Gerda, but stronger. She had broader shoulders and darker skin. Her eyes were completely black, and they had a somewhat sad look. She hugged little Gerda around the waist and said, "They won't kill you as long as you don't make us angry. I suppose you are a princess?" "No," said Gerda, and then she told her whole story and how fond she was of little Kay. The robber girl looked at her seriously, nodded her head slightly, and said, "They won't kill you, even if I do get angry with you, for I'll do it myself." Then she wiped Gerda's eyes and put her own hands inside the beautiful muff, which was so soft and warm. The coach stopped in the courtyard of a robber's castle. The walls were cracked from top to bottom. Ravens and crows flew in and out of the holes and cracks, while huge bulldogs, each looking as if it could swallow a man whole, were jumping about, but they were not allowed to bark. In the large, smoky hall, a bright fire was burning on the stone floor. There was no chimney, so the smoke went up to the ceiling and found its own way out. Soup was boiling in a large cauldron, and hares and rabbits were roasting on a spit. "You will sleep with me and all my little animals tonight," said the robber girl after they had eaten and drunk. She took Gerda to a corner of the hall where straw and rugs were laid out. Above them, on wooden slats and perches, were more than 100 pigeons. They all seemed to be asleep, though they moved slightly when the 2 little girls came near. "These all belong to me," said the robber girl, and she grabbed the one nearest to her, held it by the feet, and shook it until it flapped its wings. "Kiss it!" she cried, flapping it in Gerda's face. "There sit the wood pigeons," she continued, pointing to some slats and a cage fixed to the wall near one of the openings. "Those 2 rascals would fly away immediately if they weren't locked up tight. And here is my old sweetheart, Ba," she said, dragging out a reindeer by the horn. He wore a shiny copper ring around his neck and was tied up. "We have to hold him tight too, or else he would run away from us as well. I tickle his neck every evening with my sharp knife, which frightens him very much." Then the robber girl pulled a long knife from a crack in the wall and let it slide gently over the reindeer's neck. The poor animal began to kick, and the little robber girl laughed and pulled Gerda down into bed with her. "Are you going to keep that knife with you while you sleep?" asked Gerda, looking at it with great fear. "I always sleep with the knife by my side," said the robber girl. "No one knows what might happen. But now, tell me again all about little Kay and why you went out into the world." Then Gerda repeated her story while the wood pigeons in the cage above her cooed and the other pigeons slept. The little robber girl put one arm around Gerda's neck and held the knife in the other, and was soon fast asleep and snoring. But Gerda couldn't close her eyes at all. She didn't know whether she was going to live or die. The robbers sat around the fire, singing and drinking, and the old woman stumbled about. It was a terrible sight for a little girl to see. Then the wood pigeons said, "Coo, coo, we have seen little Kay. A white chicken carried his sled, and he sat in the Snow Queen's carriage which drove through the woods while we were lying in our nest. She blew on us, and all the young ones died except us two. Coo, coo." "What are you saying up there?" cried Gerda. "Where was the Snow Queen going? Do you know anything about it?" "She was most likely traveling to Lapland, where there is always snow and ice. Ask the reindeer tied up there with the rope." "Yes, there is always snow and ice," said the reindeer, "and it is a glorious place. You can jump and run freely on the sparkling ice plains. The Snow Queen has her summer tent there, but her strong castle is at the North Pole, on an island called Spitzbergen." "Okay, little Kay," sighed Gerda. "Lie still," said the robber girl, "or I'll stick my knife in you." In the morning, Gerda told her everything the wood pigeons had said. The little robber girl looked quite serious, nodded her head, and said, "Never mind that, never mind that. Do you know where Lapland is?" she asked the reindeer. "Who would know better than I?" said the animal while his eyes sparkled. "I was born and raised there and used to run about the snow-covered plains." "Now listen," said the robber girl. "All our men have gone away, only Mother's here, and she will stay here. But at noon she always drinks from a big bottle and then sleeps for a little while. Then I'll do something for you." Then she jumped out of bed, hugged her mother around the neck, and pulled her by the beard, crying, "My own little nanny goat, good morning." Then her mother flicked her nose until it was quite red, yet she did it all out of love. When her mother had drunk from the bottle and gone to sleep, the little robber girl went to the reindeer and said, "I would really like to tickle your neck a few more times with my knife because it makes you look so funny. But never mind, I will untie your rope and set you free so you can run away to Lapland. But you must make good use of your legs and carry this little girl to the Snow Queen's castle, where her playmate is." You heard what she told me, for she spoke loud enough, and you were listening. Then the reindeer jumped for joy. The little robber girl lifted Gerda onto his back and had the forethought to tie her on, and even gave her her own little cushion to sit on. "Here are your fur boots," she said, "because it will be very cold, but I have to keep the muff, it's too pretty. However, you won't freeze without it. Here are my mother's large warm mittens. They'll reach up to your elbows. Let me put them on you. There, now your hands look just like my mother's." But Gerda wept for joy. "I don't like to see you cry," said the little robber girl. "You should look happy now. Here are 2 loaves of bread and a ham so you won't starve." These were tied to the reindeer. Then the little robber girl opened the door, coaxed all the big dogs inside, cut the rope holding the reindeer with her sharp knife, and said, "Now run, but make sure you take good care of the little girl." Then Gerda stretched out her hand with the big mitten on it toward the little robber girl and said, "Farewell." And away flew the reindeer, over stumps and stones, through the great forest, over marshes and plains, as fast as he could. The wolves howled and the ravens screamed, while up in the sky, red lights shimmered like flames of fire. "Those are my old northern lights," said the reindeer. "Look how they flash!" And he ran on day and night, faster and faster, but the loaves of bread and the ham were all eaten by the time they reached Lapland. They stopped at a little hut. It was very shabby. The roof sloped down nearly to the ground, and the door was so low that the family had to crawl on their hands and knees to get in and out. There was no one home but an old Lapland woman who was cooking fish by the light of a whale oil lamp. The reindeer told her all about Gerda's story, but only after telling his own first, which seemed to him the most important. Gerda was so pinched with cold that she couldn't speak. "Oh, you poor things," said the Lapland woman. "You have a long way to go yet. You must travel more than 100 miles further to Finland. The Snow Queen lives there now, and she burns blue flares every evening. I will write a few words on a dried fish because I have no paper, and you can take it to the Finland woman who lives there. She can give you better information than I can." So when Gerda was warmed up and had something to eat and drink, the woman wrote a few words on the dried fish and told Gerda to take great care of it. Then she tied her on to the reindeer again, and he set off at full speed. Flash, flash went the beautiful blue northern lights in the air all night long. Finally, they reached Finland and knocked on the chimney of the Finland woman's hut, for it had no door above ground. They crawled inside, but it was so terribly hot that the woman was wearing hardly any clothes. She was small and looked very dirty. She loosened little Gerda's dress and took off her fur boots and mittens. Otherwise, Gerda wouldn't have been able to bear the heat. Then she placed a piece of ice on the reindeer's head and read what was written on the dried fish. After she had read it 3 times, she knew it by heart, so she popped the fish into the soup pot as she knew it was good to eat and she never wasted anything. The reindeer told his own story first, and then little Gerda's. The Finland woman blinked her clever eyes, but she said nothing. "You are so clever," said the reindeer. "I know you can tie all the winds of the world with a piece of string. If a sailor unties 1 knot, he gets a fair wind. When he unties the second, it blows hard. But if the 3rd and 4th are loosened, a storm comes that will uproot whole forests. Can you give this little girl something that will make her as strong as 12 men so she can overcome the Snow Queen?" "The power of 12 men," said the Finland woman. "That would be of very little use." But she went to a shelf, took down a large skin, and unrolled it. Strange characters were written on it, and she read until sweat ran down her forehead. But the reindeer begged so hard for little Gerda, and Gerda looked at the Finland woman with such pleading, tearful eyes, that the woman's own eyes began to twinkle again. She pulled the reindeer into a corner and whispered to him while she laid a fresh piece of ice on his head. Little Kay is really with the Snow Queen, but he finds everything there so much to his taste and liking that he believes it is the finest place in the world. But this is because he has a piece of broken glass in his heart and a little piece of glass in his eye. These must be taken out, or he will never be a human being again, and the Snow Queen will keep her power over him. "But can't you give little Gerda something to help her conquer this power?" "I can give her no greater power than she already has," said the woman. "Don't you see how strong that is? How men and animals are forced to serve her, and how well she has gotten through the world barefoot as she is. She cannot receive any power from me greater than she now has, which consists in her own purity and innocence of heart. If she cannot get to the Snow Queen herself and remove the glass fragments from little Kay, we can do nothing to help her. 2 miles from here, the Snow Queen's garden begins. You can carry the little girl that far and set her down by the large bush covered with red berries that stands in the snow. Do not stay gossiping, but come back here as quickly as you can." Then the Finland woman lifted little Gerda onto the reindeer, and he ran away with her as fast as he could. "Oh, I have forgotten my boots and my mittens!" cried little Gerda as soon as she felt the cutting cold. But the reindeer didn't dare stop, so he ran on until he reached the bush with the red berries. Here he set Gerda down and kissed her, and big bright tears trickled down the animal's cheeks. Then he left her and ran back as fast as he could. There stood poor Gerda, without shoes, without gloves, in the middle of cold, dreary, frozen Finland. She ran forward as quickly as she could, but a whole regiment of snowflakes surrounded her. They did not, however, fall from the sky, which was quite clear and glittering with the northern lights. The snowflakes ran along the ground, and the closer they came to her, the larger they appeared. Gerda remembered how large and beautiful they looked through the magnifying glass, but these were truly larger and much more terrible, for they were alive. They were the guards of the Snow Queen and had the strangest shapes. Some were like great porcupines, others like twisted snakes with their heads stretching out, and a few were like little fat bears with bristling fur. But all were dazzlingly white, and all were living snowflakes. Then little Gerda repeated the Lord's Prayer. The cold was so intense that she could see her own breath coming out of her mouth like steam as she spoke the words. The steam appeared to increase as she continued her prayer until it took the shape of little angels who grew larger the moment they touched the earth. They all wore helmets on their heads and carried spears and shields. Their numbers continued to increase more and more, and by the time Gerda had finished her prayer, a whole legion stood around her. They thrust their spears into the terrible snowflakes, shattering them into 100 pieces so little Gerda could move forward with courage and safety. The angel stroked her hands and feet so that she felt the cold less, and she hurried on to the Snow Queen's castle. But now we must see what Kay is doing. In truth, he was not thinking of little Gerda, and he never imagined she could be standing right in front of the palace. The walls of the palace were formed from drifting snow, and the windows and doors were made of cutting winds. There were more than 100 rooms in it, all looking as if they had been shaped by snow blown together. The largest of them stretched for several miles. They were all lit up by the vivid light of the northern lights, and they were so large and empty, so icy cold and glittering. There was no fun here, not even a little bear's ball where the storm might provide the music, and the bears could dance on their hind legs and show off their good manners. There were no pleasant games of tag or snapdragon, not even a gossip session over tea for the young lady foxes. Empty, vast, and cold were the halls of the Snow Queen. The flickering flame of the northern lights could be clearly seen, whether high or low in the sky, from every part of the castle. In the middle of this empty, endless hall of snow was a frozen lake, cracked on its surface into 1,000 shapes. Each piece resembled the others, perfect as a work of art. In the center of this lake sat the Snow Queen when she was at home. She called the lake the Mirror of Reason and said it was the best, and indeed the only one, in the world. Little Kay was blue with cold, in fact, almost black, but he didn't feel it, for the Snow Queen had kissed away his icy shivering and his heart was already a lump of ice. He dragged some sharp, flat pieces of ice back and forth, arranging them in all kinds of positions as if he wanted to make something out of them, just as we try to form various figures with little wooden tiles in a Chinese puzzle game. Kay's fingers were very artistic. He was playing the icy game of reason, and in his eyes, the figures were remarkable and of the highest importance. He thought this because of the piece of glass still sticking in his eye. He composed many complete figures, forming different words, but there was one word he could never manage to form, although he wanted to very much. It was the word eternity. The Snow Queen had said to him, "When you can figure this out, you shall be your own master, and I will give you the whole world and a new pair of skates." But he could not accomplish it. "Now, I must hurry away to warmer countries," said the Snow Queen. "I will go and look into the black craters at the tops of the burning mountains, Etna and Vesuvius, as they are called. I shall make them look white, which will be good for them, and for the lemons and the grapes." And away flew the Snow Queen, leaving little Kay quite alone in the great hall that was so many miles long. He sat and looked at his pieces of ice, thinking so deeply and sitting so still that anyone might have thought he was frozen solid. Just at this moment, little Gerda came through the great door of the castle. Cutting winds were raging around her, but she offered a prayer, and the wind settled down as if they were going to sleep. She went on until she came to the large empty hall and caught sight of Kay. She knew him immediately. She flew to him, threw her arms around his neck, and held him tight, exclaiming, "Kay, dear little Kay, I have found you at last." But he sat quite still, stiff and cold. Then little Gerda wept hot tears, which fell on his chest, penetrated his heart, thawed the lump of ice, and washed away the little piece of glass that had stuck there. Then he looked at her, and she sang, "Roses bloom and fade away, but we shall see the Christ child one day." Then Kay burst into tears, and he wept so hard that the splinter of glass washed out of his eye. Then he recognized Gerda and said joyfully, "Gerda, dear little Gerda, where have you been all this time, and where have I been?" He looked all around him and said, "How cold it is, and how large and empty it all looks." He clung to Gerda, and she laughed and wept for joy. It was so lovely to see them that even the pieces of ice danced about, and when they were tired and lay down, they formed themselves into the letters of the word the Snow Queen had said he must find out before he could be his own master, and have the whole world and a pair of new skates. Then Gerda kissed his cheeks, and they turned pink. She kissed his eyes, and they shone like her own. She kissed his hands and his feet, and he became quite healthy and cheerful. The Snow Queen could come home whenever she pleased, for his release papers stood there written in shining letters of ice. Then they took each other by the hand and walked out of the great palace of ice. They talked about their grandmother and the roses on the roof, and as they walked, the winds were at rest and the sun burst forth. When they arrived at the bush with the red berries, the reindeer was waiting for them. He had brought another young reindeer with him, whose udders were full of milk, and the children drank her warm milk and kissed her on the mouth. Then the reindeer carried Kay and Gerda first to the Finland woman, where they warmed themselves thoroughly in the hot room, and she gave them directions for their journey home. Next, they went to the Lapland woman, who had made some new clothes for them and fixed up their sleds. Both reindeer ran by their side and followed them as far as the border of the country, where the first green leaves were budding. Here they said goodbye to the two reindeer and the Lapland woman, and everyone said, "Farewell." Then the birds began to twitter, and the forest was full of green young leaves. Out of the forest came a beautiful horse that Gerda remembered, for it was the one that had pulled the golden coach. A young girl was riding it, wearing a shining red cap on her head and pistols in her belt. It was the little robber girl who had gotten tired of staying at home. She was heading north first, and if that didn't suit her, she meant to try some other part of the world. She recognized Gerda immediately, and Gerda remembered her. It was a joyful meeting. "You are a fine fellow to go wandering about in this way," she said to little Kay. "I should like to know whether you deserve to have anyone go to the ends of the world to find you." But Gerda patted her cheeks and asked about the prince and princess. "They have gone to foreign countries," said the robber girl. "And the crow?" asked Gerda. "Oh, the crow is dead," she replied. "His tame sweetheart is now a widow and wears a bit of black wool around her leg. She mourns very pitifully, but it's all nonsense. But now tell me how you managed to get him back." Then Gerda and Kay told her all about it. "So, snip, snap, snare, it's all right at last," said the robber girl. Then she took both their hands and promised that if she ever passed through their town, she would call and pay them a visit. And then she rode away into the wide world. Gerda and Kay went hand in hand toward home. As they walked, spring appeared more lovely with its green plants and beautiful flowers. Very soon they recognized the large town where they lived and the tall steeples of the churches. The sweet bells were ringing merrily as they entered the town and found their way to their grandmother's door. They went upstairs into the little room where everything looked just as it used to. The old clock was going tick, tick, and the hands pointed to the time of day. But as they passed through the door into the room, they realized that they were both grown up, a man and a woman. The roses out on the roof were in full bloom and peeping in at the window, and there stood the little chairs where they had sat as children. Kay and Gerda sat down, each on their own chair, and held each other by the hand, while the cold, empty grandeur of the Snow Queen's palace vanished from their memories like a bad dream. The grandmother sat in God's bright sunshine and read aloud from the Bible. "Unless you become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of God." And Kay and Gerda looked into each other's eyes and all at once understood the words of the old song. "Roses bloom and fade away, but we shall see the Christ child one day." And they both sat there, grown up, yet children at heart, and it was summer, warm, beautiful summer,